Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. This is my first episode in 2025, and I have a very special episode for you today. My guest for today is Dr. Anemona Peres, who is a psychologist, a clinical and transpersonal hypnotherapist, a shamanic practitioner, and an urban mystic. And Dr. Anemona and I have been trying to find the perfect time and space to get this episode recorded for a few months now. So we are both very happy to finally have the right divine timing to come together. Welcome, Anemona.
Thank you so much, Lazara. I'm so happy to be here finally. And I do believe in divine timing. So this is the right moment.
Absolutely. And so I've been following you for quite some time. I always start with an introduction of how I know the guests. And I came across Dr. Anemona during my rapid transformational therapy, my RTT. You will have, regular listeners will have heard me speak about this before. And I came across this wonderful human being, this wonderful transformational healer through her posts, right? You do these amazing, informative, really quite thought provoking and deep posts. I'm not going to pretend that I always knew what you were talking about in those early days, but that interest and that fascination that I had and I still have around the mind and the healing journey just led me to read everything that you were posting. And I couldn't always quite grasp it, but I could feel the impact of them. Tell us about your posting and your sharing of the information that you do really, really well, I believe, on Facebook.
Thank you. This is a great question. It actually makes me reflect on on like what's the dynamic. And I have to say, I am such a big resistor when it comes to what's called marketing because I believe I do not sell mental health. I'm a facilitator of healing. I am a consciousness teacher, if you like. So everything I write well, I just go on the beach with my dog and then I have a few minutes just sitting down and I start writing and I type on my notes application on my iPhone. And that's how those posts come out. And it is about my journey and it is about my reflections about the issues that my clients are confronted with, the way I resolved, overcame issues in my life. And it's always something that really fuels me, that I'm really passionate about. I don't write for the sake of writing. I write about, and I don't write consistently, as you would hear that you have to write every day and you have to. I've done you have to, and shoulds and must my whole life as a high flyer in an EU agency. So I'm done with that. I work by inspiration and I work by passion. I learned to follow my joy. And when I say follow my joy, I don't only mean my dog joy, but to actually follow my joy and my passion when it comes to what I believe it's my purpose and the way I live my purpose. So really what you see, it's what fires me.
Yeah.
And of course I love to bring science and mysticism. So probably what's a little bit mind-boggling, it's the fact that I bring in one piece of writing, probably authors that you would never think that they belong to the same sentence, or concepts or approaches. But I believe that's my mission and my purpose because I am an urban mystic, but I also am a scientist, a psychologist. And to me, there is no dichotomy, there is no opposition between the two. This is just artificially created. So
Yes.
that's where I come on the border. I used to be a border police officer because I am a police psychologist originally, a forensic psychologist, and I used to work for the EU Borders Agency and for the National Border Police Service of my country of origin, Romania. And I love the metaphor of borders. We operate at the borders of consciousness as therapists, as healers. And on top of that, I operate at the border, at the interface between science and mysticism.
That's
So
such a
that's where the
gift.
posts come.
I've got like goosebumps and so many questions already. Now, listeners, with that short introduction and that short bringing Dr. Anemona into the conversation, you will see and feel and hear why I had to get this human onto this podcast, because this is you've pinpointed exactly the point that I was drawn to. You drawn to your work, and I even we had the divine timing of coming together face to face recently in Spain before I packed up my Spain home and to find your beautiful, beautiful place where you live by the sea. And it that's what I could explain to you, this draw that I have, because as you know, I come from this corporate world of training, leadership development, where everything is accreditations and everyone needs to be trained, highly trained, and you have to have all these certifications to be able to do the job that you're doing. And we then go into the RTT world, and that is based on the scientific facts around the mind. And it's all based in this world of very kind of strong nuts and bolts, I would say, and very strong, like academia world is where you really come from, what the work that you've done, and the qualifications that you have. But then when you add in these concepts of like urban mystic, like when you bring that into that sentence, and some of the books that you've actually recommended on Facebook that I've since read, like Anna, the grandmother of Jesus, and all of these just amazing concepts. There's no dichotomy. I love that. There isn't any. We're at this border.
Yeah,
And
and yeah.
I was just going to say, how do you, when you're at that border, how do you see this like interface between that scientific world and the world that you do your shamanic journeys, as an example? Like how do you bring that all together? And I know you speak at Oxford as well on the topic. It's like I just love that you're doing this work. Tell us more.
Well, Oxford, thanks for bringing that up. Oxford was World's Transpersonal Psychology Conference because actually there is a scientific domain, there is a scientific discipline, which is transpersonal psychology, that uses scientific methods and scientific research methods to do research on soul, psyche, and consciousness. And this is not new. Research into channeling and telepathy and all kinds of psychic abilities were done since the 60s. So that is not new. It's just that it's probably not mainstream. But the fact that British Psychological Society, BPS, which is a very serious organization that accredits psychologists in the UK, has a branch that is called Transpersonal Psychology Section that I'm a
Okay.
member of, and it was one of the organizers of the conference.
Right.
Speak to the fact that there is a scientific discipline that looks into holistically into body, mind, soul, psyche, spirit, consciousness unit, because
Mm-hmm.
everything is consciousness, everything is energy. So it's interesting that you asked me how do I bring this in my work, because I think this was just naturally the way I approach my work, and this is also what made a difference for me when I had the courage to step into my purpose, to actually start my practice as a psychotherapist and holistic healer. And I studied many psychotherapy approaches. I studied transactional analysis and Gestalt, and I
Yeah.
studied NLP and all kinds of energy healing and very, because this was my passion. So alongside my job as a psychologist, as a police psychologist, which is a little bit, again, on the borders, on different borders, I've always been passionate about this. And it was like an unspoken dream to maybe one day when I'm going to be good enough, fixed enough, healed enough, clever
Mm-hmm.
enough, so on and so forth, maybe I would dare to become a psychotherapist. And I've said this many times. It was thanks to hypnosis, past life regression with Mira Kelly, and the amazing rapid transformational therapy of Marissa Peer, that I had the courage to step into my purpose. And it was to some extent about hypnosis, but it was more about the magic touch that hypnosis had on me and what it did, other than resolving massive issues that talk therapy just didn't really get there to resolve. It probably prepared the grounds, but it didn't really nail it. So it was on one hand the experience on my own healing, but it was the fact that it opened me up irrevocably to spirit and to higher guidance. And I would feel myself in trance when I was leading hypnosis sessions. And at first, I didn't know what that is. It just felt like at the end of a session, I was like, I know I'm smart, but I don't think I'm that smart. Like, where did this question come from? Where did this idea? It's like every session I would invent, I would create new tools, new visualizations, new experiences for my client. So I would never run the typical RTT process because, excuse me, because things would just pop up and the client would be amazed. How did you think about that? Why did you say that? Well, I don't know. And then as I started to dive deeper into transpersonal psychology, because in the end I am an academic, as you said, I started to realize I'm really not alone, and I'm not on the side of woo-woo. I'm on the side of the greatest advancement in psychology, and I have the same dilemma, if you want, or the same false problem as Dr. Joe Dispenza or Dr. Bruce Lipton or Dr. Greg Braden and Dr. Stanislav Grof, who is one of the biggest names in transpersonal psychology, or Jung or Carl Gustav Jung. Everyone would post here and there something clever from Jung, which is the father of analytical depth psychology, after Freud, the father of psychoanalysis. Who himself, he would put himself into expanded states of consciousness through what is actually shamanic journeying. So a process that he called active imagination, and that's what it is. He would self-induce a hypnotic state, an expanded state of consciousness. And that's how he received information and guidance, and he allowed his imagination to explore higher realms. And that's how he created his main concept, the archetypes. Right. Everyone now uses the word archetypes. There are three things that everyone in my Facebook page is using. It's narcissistic personality and narcissism and gaslighting, and then the imposter syndrome, and then the archetypes. It's like these are three big buzzwords that you would see and hear in the therapy and coaching environment. And what people don't know is that Jung was using essentially shamanic journeying and other ways of inducing expanded states of consciousness. He had guides, Salome and Philemon. So he had spirit guides who would advise him and who would, channel, in the lack of a better word, his concepts, the archetypes, the active imagination, process, the individuation process, which is about how we become who we truly are, so on and so forth, his psychic architecture. And of course, his family he didn't want to publish his writings, his notes on that, which was what became the famous Red Book that was published only in 2006, post-mortem, because he didn't want his credibility as a serious scientist to be challenged in any way, and for him to lose his credibility. And his family only decided to publish in 2006, and way after he died. And I think this became now the most read and the most well-known book of Carl Gustav Jung. And that is the beginning of transpersonal psychology, which was not called so at the time. So if Jung thinks it's okay to have spirit guides, and that's how he created the massive legacy that he left to the world, who am I to disagree?
Yes, exactly. There's such a beautiful and really in-depth and detailed history of how we come to speak today. And I think what I loved is that you did start off with this your journey, and how you stepped into your purpose began really with with RTT. And I think that's exactly what happened with me. Like I didn't have the strength to publish, or I didn't have the strength to write my book about how I turned my life around. I could never have written that book if I hadn't done RTT, right? It's like, for me, it feels like that's really when I stepped into my spiritual journey, if you wish, as well. Because, if you like, because what happened was I was able to clear a lot of the trauma the way I feel. Like I connect to my heart, I connect to my energy system and my heart. And I can only do that because I've cleared away all the debris. You know, all the stuff that you were afraid to look at the beginning because it would be just so scary, and I'll just put that under the carpet. Then the RTT process for me, the RTT journey, cleared away so much stuff that I felt stronger, I felt clearer, and I felt more connected to the truth. You know, and that's the way that I always feel. Underneath all of this, underneath this, the labels and the woo-woo suggestions and the everything that comes with it, I feel like when you talk about how you went into trance when you were doing RTT sessions, for me that's the truth. Oh, we've frozen. Ay, 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 we've frozen. Can you still hear me?
Yes, you're back now. You're back.
Ah, right. It just froze in there, right? So 15, I just need this for my editor. 15,
Mhm.
30, we'll stop and start again. Yeah, could you hear what I was saying? No, we'll start again.
Only to the part that you said you wouldn't have written your book if it wasn't for RTT and
Ah,
Step into Purpose.
okay. Yeah, so picking that back up again. So yeah, the RTT journey for me was really about clearing away the debris of the stuff that I couldn't tap into, that I couldn't look at, because what I found is underneath that pain of my past trauma, that's where my power was. My power couldn't be fully realized. I couldn't really step into what I'm here to do, what I'm here to talk about, because it was being covered up with the debris of past pain. So when you said the beginning of your journey and around RTT was that's what led you stepping into your purpose, I really resonated with that, right? Because and so thinking about our listeners, right, in terms of the pragmatic side of this journey, of this getting to the point where you can channel, where you can trance, where you can really go into what I call the truth that's coming through you, that's not from you, that it's coming through you, would you say a great place to start is this therapeutic journey?
So, can you please repeat the question? What was the question
Yeah,
in
so
which?
what's the process? What's the pragmatic side of this for someone who's listening who really would love to get to the point where they are themselves able to really tap into this truth of who they are, tap into this ability to
Yeah.
speak about things that are beyond them, that it's coming through them.
Well, I can only speak from my own experience. I mean, I've always had a sense of there is something bigger than just what meets the eye. And I grew up in a communist country, so we were very uneducated in terms of religion or spirituality. And maybe that was a good thing because we didn't have a very constrictive religious framework. So after the communism fell, there was such a burst of interest for all things mystical and spirituality. So I've always been interested in the world religions, but more from a philosophical perspective. I love Joseph Campbell and the power of myth and everything that is mythology. The world myth actually tell the same story. And how can we explain that ancient civilizations from different parts of the world that could have never communicated or met have the same myth or have deities that look the same and fulfill the same functions? So I probably embarked more consciously on a spiritual quest alongside my therapeutical journey
Mm-hmm.
because as you just very well said, it all starts with acknowledging our own trauma and dealing with our own trauma, because clearing the shadow, alchemizing the shadow, as Jung would say, alchemizing the shadow, and there is always be remnants of the shadow, but dealing with the biggest chunks of density, if you want, of dirt in our cells, quite literally, because what is trauma? It's implicit, it's frozen implicit memories that affect our capacity to react in the here and now as an autonomous adult with the competence, with the resources, with the skills that we have. as adults, and we revert back to those trauma response mechanisms that saved us as children. We needed that. We needed those response. We needed to hide. We needed to play small. We needed to create all those mechanisms that were all those defenses that actually kept us safe and sane and alive as children. But then as we heal our trauma, we are also opening up to spiritual gifts, which, again, in the absence of a better word, because everyone has these gifts. It's the human design. We are designed with the capacity to communicate with spirit, with the capacity to read each other's minds. Although, do we really want that? We're probably not at a level of humanity, we're probably not that advanced in terms of level of consciousness to get there, but people are getting there. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just a matter of choosing to acknowledge that we all have these capacities. We can all just take 3 deep breaths like you masterfully did at the beginning of the recording. I just love that little grounding exercise. That's all it takes. 3 deep breaths, clear the mind clutter, and just ask yourself, what does my soul, or what does my higher self, or what does my intuition want me to know? And start
Yeah.
writing whatever comes to mind, without filtering, without judging, without already using the critical rational lenses. And you would be surprised by the loving, compassionate language that comes through you. You being, I use a generic you being someone who's very critical with herself, very demanding, having very high standards, you would be very surprised. And it took me over 15 years of talk therapy, and another 5, 6, 7 years maybe, and the journey continues,
Mm-hmm.
of looking into expanded states of consciousness. And besides the intellectual fascination, it was really only after I was using hypnosis, because hypnosis, opened me up to expanded states of consciousness in a more structured way. But particularly now, since I'm using shamanic practices, because it gives me a structured process through which I can connect to the higher intelligence, higher wisdom, to the universal wisdom within and without.
Yeah.
So it is the truth within, as you said, to connect to the truth. It is the truth within. It is the higher truth. It is a higher intelligence that communicates through us. And I call my therapeutic process, because I moved a little bit. And I think we all inevitably do that. As we
Yeah.
step into our therapist identity, we create our own way of doing therapy. So the process that I use, I call it hypnophysis. And what physis means, physis is a term from transactional analysis. Well, it's a Greek word, but was brought in transactional analysis by Eric Berne, the founder of it. And physis is that inherent propensity to heal, to grow, to thrive that exists in all human being. It's that innate capacity to actually self-heal, and not only to heal, but to grow, to expand, to create, to self-actualize. And
Yes.
that's why I call it hypnophysis. And I believe there is that connection that we have with this higher intelligence, higher wisdom that exists all around us, that exists in nature, in the trees, in the ocean, in the animals and plants, in the rocks, and in ourselves, that connects us to all that is. And that
It's
is
almost
Pisces.
It's almost like what came to me when you were talking, in addition to the goosebumps, and I could feel myself expanding anymore when you were talking, because it only takes those 3 deep breaths. It only takes this consciousness of the power that we hold within us to connect to that or that I think of it as like our original reset button, that ability to expand and heal. That's our natural status or natural place that we should be. And it's not that far away. The problem that we have is that we get too caught up in, even nowadays, you mentioned about the buzzwords. There's a lot about meditating. You should be meditating, yoga, moving your body, eating a specific thing, and people get too, they look at it as if this is going to be too much for me to do. This is just too far away. I need to have some sort of qualification. Or and what I started to do, and I share this with my listeners quite often, is that process that you spoke about where you just ask for guidance and you write down. That was one of the biggest out of everything I've done. That was the biggest unlocker for me for this channeling. What came out in my morning pages in the morning, some I would be like, I don't use those sentences. I don't really use that sentence structure. I don't use those concepts. And I used to be able to feel the energy buzzing in my left hand as I was writing. It was like a real powerful process. It got to the point where my family, it was such a sacred space for me in the morning to do it. My family would say, "Oh, she's doing her pages," and my daughter would try and copy me, like as a tiny, tiny thing with a pen. "I'm doing my pages, mommy. Look." And so it's just that 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day would set me on the trajectory of higher consciousness. Like how powerful. And I've been reading Power versus Force. And I thought about that book when you were, I think I probably got a recommendation from one of your posts, because every time you recommend your book list, I'm like, okay, which ones have I not read? And that book really woke me up to this element of where we all are, where as a society, where we typically tend to be in terms of levels of consciousness, where fear is in this, like where fear resides, what type of words and feelings are associated with those lower levels, and the words that you only just need to read the words on those higher levels of consciousness, and you can feel yourself expanding. Like only reading words, and you feel a different source of power.
Yeah. And again, the thing that I find unhelpful in the spiritual community and in the spiritual healing paradigm is this notion of ego is bad and only being led by the higher self and the intuition and all the spiritual quest is good, because that's also what scares people off, because we need the ego mechanism to navigate life in this society. Now, one thing is to be on top of your ego, and I don't mean it in the egomaniac, egocentric. I really mean it as a mechanism to orient in this life on 3D, this life on Earth. So you are not led by your ego. You use the ego. You are in charge. So the higher self is in charge, and that's how your higher self or your soul is in charge, by you making the time to do your pages, because that tells you what your soul wants from you, or the guidance. That's how you receive guidance. And like many years ago, I think 6, 7, 8 maybe years ago, I was asking myself, what's my purpose, what's my purpose, what's my purpose? Because I mean, I had a successful career. We spoke about it. There are so many similarities and parallels in our lives and how we got where we are. So from the outside, I had absolutely zero reason to change my life. Everything was amazing. I had books published, international career, international visibility, so on and so forth. And still there was that nudge that there must be more to life than this. And more is actually less, because now I live a pretty small life in a way, and simple life by the beach in a small village in the south of Spain. And I've never been happier, and I've never felt so grounded in my life, really, and so much confidence that this is why I'm here and this is what I'm supposed to do. And what got me here was a very clever question by one of my mentors, Mira Kelly, who she's a transpersonal hypnotherapist, and she trained with Dr. Brian Weiss and Dolores Cannon, and she was also collaborator of Wayne Dyer. She actually healed Wayne Dyer through past life regression of his leukemia. She's an amazing human, and I owe her a lot. It's her and Marissa Peer that really, I would always be grateful for what they brought into my life. And Mira was saying to me, Anemona, just ask yourself in every moment, what does my soul want right now? What does my soul want right now? And that's not to say that we need to neglect our responsibilities, because again, the ego mechanism is necessary. We have to function in this society. But when you follow your soul voice, the reward from the universe, it's just incredible. And I don't want to sound like rainbows and fairy tales, but really, on the other side of fear, there is so much support from the universe, because if you get to have that trust and faith to follow your soul purpose, as Paulo Coelho said in The Alchemist, it's like the
Yes.
universe plots, the universe conspires to fulfill your wishes, to bring to you what you need. And that's creation mode, yeah, other than forcing, pushing. And it does take that level of trust. And you only get there through a serious amount of healing and awareness, because that's what opens you up to spirit and helps you really trust and hear and trust and not resist that guidance. And it's interesting that probably 80% of my clients are themselves graduates of various therapy modalities, or coaches, or aspiring healers. And probably 80% of the 80% presenting problems that they come with, it's, I'm feeling stuck. I don't know what to do. I don't know which way to go. I'm not sure if this is. And feeling stuck, it's just a symptom of you resisting your truth, of you fighting back what you know you should do, fighting, like not feeling ready or feeling afraid to take the responsibility to make that change. And I made it my mission, because I've been there myself. I had all that resistance because I just had a really good life, and it was like trading security and stability and everything that I built for my sole purpose.
Yes.
I didn't blink, because at some point this simply becomes, as Sarah Landon says, it's choiceless. So, and like people tell me, oh my God, Anemona, you are really brave to do that. And I'm flattered that people think I'm brave, but I'm thinking, you know what? Actually, it was the easiest thing I've done in my life, because it was just, of course. Of course, that's how I'm going to spend the rest of my life. I turned 50 this year. So the next 50 years of my life, uh, I I cannot live any other way than living my purpose once I awaken to that.
I've just like, as you were talking, I feel like when you asked the question, what does your soul want, right? If I was really in this conversation, and when you said, what does your soul want? I got teary, because what I heard was to be free, to be free. Then everything else that came after that, in terms of what you were sharing, Dr. Animona, felt like you were talking directly to my soul. And I was in this space of just, wow, wanting to write down, wanting to type what you were saying. I can replay this episode, but I hope everyone that's listening can feel the power of your what you're sharing, because it's this is it, right? This is the point where we make these decisions that, if we put it through the lens of our logical thinking mind, we say, oh my God, why would I, if I even, we were talking about this, my example, leave a corporate career um, that I've built for 20 years, training leaders internationally, something that I can do with my eyes closed. I got the feedback that I was too confident once. And I said, of course I'm really confident. I know exactly. I can pinpoint exactly what these people need, and I will be able to give them it. So walking away from that to a life of, I don't know what's here for me. I don't know what I'm going to do, changing country, and then being drawn to RTT and going through this whole process. It's like, I always say it's not for the faint hearted, because you have to really look at your pain. But if I look back now, and you probably have the same thing, if you look back to where you were when you had this really successful career, amazing life, materialistic life of traveling and lots of accolades. And you look back and you think, actually, I would be more afraid if I were still in that spot now, right?
Oh,
Because,
I love
yeah,
this. Yeah.
yeah, because we think that we're protecting ourselves. We think we're protecting our heart. I realized that I have my whole life been protecting myself from my own vulnerability. I am so vulnerable. I can cry at the drop of a hat. I can feel, someone can say something and I can feel what it feels like in their bodies and their heart. And I can start crying. A complete stranger can say something seemingly innocent and I can feel the pain behind that. I spent my whole life protecting that, thinking that I can't show that vulnerability. I've got to be strong. I've got to be professional. I've got to be. And now my listeners will, even like the last two episodes, I think probably the last 10 episodes, I've cried because I allow myself to connect to my heart. And so, what I absolutely love is that you have created this life for yourself. And I love this concept of it was choiceless because you're following what it is that you're supposed to do and everything becomes easy. So if you're listening to this episode and you're thinking, I have this voice inside me that's telling me or shouting even loud, it gets louder, by the way, folks, the older that you get, it becomes more difficult to ignore it. When I chose to come to Costa Rica, everything was really easy. I made the decision over breakfast. I felt like I shifted timelines. I've shared that with the listeners before because in an instant, my life completely changed and all my choice points changed, my reality changed. And for that space, it was really easy. Yeah, I thought I'd share that with you.
Oh yeah, I love that you said yeah, it was actually more risky, or yeah, living that way, living the old way. And I've been last year in November, I've been to UK Hypnosis Convention, which is like probably the biggest global event in the hypnosis and hypnotherapy community. And I had a presentation and a little practical guided journey on complex trauma. So how I'm using hypnotherapy, hypnophysis, which draws from many different modalities, including RTT, to help people with complex trauma. And I started my speech by saying, I'm Dr. Anemona Peres, and my PhD was a trauma response. And my whole career was a trauma response
Mm-hmm.
because it was about exactly what you said. It was about, like creating that shield where I had the social status and the power position that gave me a false sense of safety, a false sense of relief, while underneath everything was still bubbling, and all the unresolved wounds and unresolved trauma. And the other aspect is that I often think, I don't know how I could live a life without having the awareness and without being able to use the higher guidance. And it explains why people are so anxious, why people are so scared of the future, why people run, why people eat away, drink away, smoke away, gamble away, use all this compensatory. Workaholism is another trauma. Yeah, it's a trauma response mechanism. So why people live in such a way that is unaligned to their soul, and have to find all these compensatory mechanisms to shut down that voice that says, nope, nope, that's not good for you, that's not right. So it is, I think, the big risk. But I was courageous, I was brave in my ignorance back then, was to live that way, because I just didn't know better. And when I knew better, it was choiceless.
Mm-hmm. And I would love you to explain to us now with this levels of consciousness and with the current environment. You've already mentioned there's a lot of buzzwords out there. There's a lot of things that you're seeing in your world that people are talking about. I think one of them that you mentioned, that narcissism. I hear this concept, this word used quite a lot nowadays. And what would you say are the main areas of focus for folks to start to think about, how do I um, how do I start to clear? How do I start to follow? What's the what are you seeing a lot in your world right now?
What I'm seeing in my work right now.
Yes.
Well, I believe your niche evolves organically, and because as a therapist, so you attract clients that usually reflect different facets and different stages of you of your own healing journey. And when I started my practice, most of my clients would have various types of history of narcissistic abuse as developmental trauma. And there is a whole, again, mythology about narcissistic abuse. I mean, we all have a narcissistic wound. Pretty much everyone who has been abused and neglected as a child has what it's called the narcissistic wound, the wound of the core self. Now, that doesn't make you an NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. That may give you a number of traits, narcissistic traits that you had to adopt again as a defense mechanism. And as you start your own healing process, all these fall away. And it's about, the need for attention, the need to be special, so on and so forth. But I don't get into the topic. And yeah, it's more and more exposed. You see it on a world scale. You see it in corporations. You see it in media. You see it in our societal environment. It's being more and more exposed just because humanity's level of consciousness raises, and people start not to just tolerate everything and not to tolerate abuse, because people start stepping into their power. So at the beginning of my practice, a lot of my clients would come with narcissistic abuse as developmental trauma, so having one of their parents exhibiting abusive behavior. And yes, that would reflect my own trauma and my own healing. And then slowly it evolved more into, actually, my second big phase as a therapist was working with HSP, with highly sensitive persons, because I'm also one. And now I'm again reconsidering and reconceptualizing my understanding of HSP, because I wonder if it's actually not just, it's just neurodivergence. It's part of the spectrum. So anyway, that was another phase. So like helping people understand that they have a high sensitivity, which is a gift and not a curse, if you know how to cater for your needs and how to acknowledge and use the gifts, and even claim your needs, because yes, your brain works differently and you deserve to have the environment adjusting to that. And I saw like beautiful people expanding and embracing their qualities as HSPs, because the capacity for information processing, the capacity for subtleties, the connection, the attunement, the emotional attunement. It's the best therapists and psychologists and writers and actors and artists in general and architects are highly sensitive people. And now lately, my niche again evolved organically. That's why you'll hear me again saying, I don't believe in marketing. I believe in allowing, I let spirit do my marketing. I let my soul do my marketing, because my soul is just guiding me. So naturally, it all evolved now into helping therapists and coaches and healers and graduates of various therapy modalities, and also energy healers and more towards the mystical healing spectrum, to step into their purpose, because I have done it. So that's what now reflects that facet of me that had the courage, and who also had the courage to step out of what I call step out of my spiritual closet, which is that it's not my clever idea. It was Rebecca Campbell who was using that expression. So first is, yes, get the confidence to step into your purpose, because the rewards that are waiting for you, it's just, you know what it means to live your purpose and to live in joy. And it doesn't mean it's all going to be rainbows and fairy tales, but from where we are now, we know how to keep ourselves in check. We know how to, we have that level of self-awareness. If fear of tomorrow hits me, I know what I need to do. Oh, wait, Anemona, this is not the adult you. That's that little child, that little girl, the inner child, that felt that she's all alone and she cannot rely on anyone, and there's no support, and she's not going to make it. So I have a little talk with my inner girl, and I bring her to the reality of who I am today and of how much support I have. My guides were telling me, you will hear a lot from me. My guides were telling me. I became the person that says, my guides were
Yeah,
telling me. So, I received the guidance, update your perception, Anemona. It's not true that you're alone. It's not true that you're not supported. It's not true that it's only on you, strong, independent corporate woman. These are all outdated perceptions. So all I have to do is to have a little chat with my inner child who's still like responding from those old identities and old trauma response mechanisms, and remind myself that I outgrew that. So, I always say there's no such a thing as 100% healed human. That's only when you're dead. Yeah. So from a certain level of healing and self-healing, what it takes, it's self-awareness. And don't beat yourself up. Be gentle, be compassionate, congratulate yourself for all that it takes to get yourself here. And that's why I love to work with people who are afraid to step into their purpose and feel stuck and have all this fear of visibility, imposter syndrome, fear of their own powers. That's a really interesting one, and it has a lot of resonance with experiences and past lives. And maybe there is such a thing as past life. Maybe it's just a metaphor that the psyche is offering to be able to work through certain blocks. I have my personal opinions about that. It doesn't matter from a healing perspective. Really, the therapeutic value of that metaphor is what matters. So
yeah.
it's what's my niche and my mission now. Really, is help people hold their hand to do what I've done. And the other thing that people are telling me is, yeah, Anemona, but it was easy for you because you are a PhD and you're a doctor and a psychologist. That was a trauma response.
Hmm.
That was a trauma response. It's not the papers. It's me being serious about my healing journey, and it's me opening up to spirit. This is what made the difference for me, and this is what can make the difference for everyone.
So powerful, because when you put it that way, what I was getting from you from the very beginning, since I started connecting to your Facebook post, was this openness. This openness to, these are the concepts, these are people, the influencers, the people that have given all this amazing techniques and things to the world, and I've got my opinion, and I base everything I've all my history is based on everything I've researched and read, but also my experiences. It's what's coming through me. And I think that just offers such a beautiful, unique, and powerful perspective for people. All throughout this interview, I have felt like I am on a healing session. I am in a, like this beautiful journey with you all the way through this, because when you speak, you're not speaking with, this is an absolute truth, this is something that everyone should do. It's very much a case of, you're very well read. You're very, very qualified to speak about the psyche and speak about the mind and speak about all our trauma responses. And you can piece all that together, and you're coupling that with the truth of what is really coming through you. And I can't underestimate how powerful it feels being on the other side of that. So, if you want to see what stepping into your purpose looks like, we've got a really great example of that here today, listeners, because I know a lot of people listening to the show are maybe still in that world of full time employment, still in that framework with that one eye on what else could be for me, what else could I be doing in my life. And so, this episode has been a really great example of how to start to walk into that. And so, what I would love for you to share with us, just as we wrap up this conversation today, whatever you feel that you want to add, but the main thing I want listeners to take away is, how can they work with you? What are you doing right now? What are you bringing to the world that packages up this just amazing opportunity to heal?
Well, on the same note, I was really inspired and guided to create a group program that is called Step Into Your Purpose, because I was working on that individually with so many. And the nudge, the inspiration, and also my passion, because recently I really love to run groups. I love the dynamic of groups. So Step Into Your Purpose program, the full title is Step Into Your Purpose, Your Expansion Awaits, is dedicated to everyone who feels that there's more to life than that what they're living right now. And it really tackles all fears and blocks that I witnessed in therapists to be and healers to be, and not only in like anyone who's interested in their personal development and who feels that there's something else about my mission here on earth, that it's not about my job, it's about my presence in the world. And we are going to use trauma-informed hypnotherapy, hypnophysis processes, my Rainbow Bridge process, which is guided imagery, multisensory guided imagery, which you were playing on the Rainbow Bridge yourself. Also shamanic journeys. So there's going to be Magic Thursday, because for 6 months we will meet every Thursday. That's commitment, but that's commitment to your purpose. And so there will be a mix of healing and consciousness expansion processes, and also coaching and group coaching, and room for discussions and for integration and consolidation of all this. And we look into the major fears: fear of visibility, being stuck, fear of own powers, unworthiness. I'm not worthy of abundance. I'm not worthy of living a successful life. I'm not worthy to be paid by my clients for my gifts. The last of the 6 modules of the core program is about your therapist identity. Who are you as a therapist? Because you will attract people who will reflect the identity that you project. So how honest are you about who you truly are? And that again makes a difference between success or not yet success as a therapist. And then there are some additional modules that look at imposter is also part of the core modules. It's stepping into your competence and your mastery, which already exists in you, because it's not about the qualifications. It's not about the papers. I cannot say this enough. And I know I told you I'm writing a book together with a friend. She's a channeler. So I put her in hypnosis and she channels, and I ask the questions. And the book will be called Conversations with the Andromedans. It's the Andromedan collective that we are both connected to. And the Lemurian collective also showed up. And I was asking questions to which I think I know the answers, because these questions represent really the curiosity and the needs of all healers and light workers and therapists that I work with that have all this uncertainty. And they were saying, it's your frequency, it's your energetic signature that attracts people to you. That's who you attract as a therapist. So as a healer, the clearer you are on your identity, the more successful you can be, because you're authentic. So this is what the program is about. People thought I'm nuts when they saw the price is very cheap, because I really want to make this accessible to people. And it's sharing my also my own story and my lessons and my difficulties and how I keep managing and how I keep myself in those flow states, and what I do when I fall, because I do fall. There's no rainbow. I cannot sell rainbows and fairy tales. There's no such a thing. You have to know how to manage yourself and to be aware of your shadow. So that's what really excites me for this year is Step Into Your Purpose program. I have another one in the pipeline. This one is launched already, Step Into Your Purpose. It will start on March, first week on March, so I'm still receiving applications. The second program that I will launch probably in May, it's Connect to the Healer Within, and uses the same processes, also group processes, but it's more connected to activating those self-healing programs and become aware of your ability to heal and learning how to do that. So it's more for general public.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm still running my intervision program, which is it's a group supervision because I'm accredited supervisor as well and mentor. And this is where we discuss cases. This is where we review cases, and then we support each other on the journey to become the extraordinary therapist that we truly are.
I love the work that you're doing. It's really thought provoking, but it's also got this real collection of different modalities, different paths that you've taken that you know work. And I think for folks out there who are thinking about going into this world, who want to break free and step into their healing purpose, and for those therapists, etc., who are listening, who are on that difficult edge of I'm not really sure if what I'm doing is right. I mean, look at you and look at your purpose and what you've stepped into, and then can get that help through those programs. And so, what I'll do, dear listeners, is I will share the links of how you can find Dr. Anemona along with the show notes, and I really urge you to follow her on Facebook and get as much information as you can on those programs, and really consider joining them, because if you think back to the 55 minutes that we've had together, the 54 minutes, you will see the power and the impact that you can have when you're working with you. And I am so, so grateful that in divine timing, as I'm here in Costa Rica, scrambling around this morning, looking for my microphone because I barely know what my name is in these days, let alone where, where my microphone is kept nowadays. But I'm so glad that it happened now, because I feel like everything that you've shared, I was really ready to receive it. So thank you. Thank you for that.
And I was ready to share it, as now it got a shape. So yeah, thank you so much, Lazara, for inviting me. I know we could speak forever. We had that experience before, that if we start speaking, we would never stop.
So maybe you'll come back for a part two. That's what I'm putting that out there. I'm putting that. Let's see when we can meet again for part two.
Sure, I would
Thank you
love to.
so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, everyone, and I will speak to you again soon.